Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to today's video, which is going to be my 2025 yearly reading wrap up. You guys may have seen the poll that I put up on my channel asking which type of yearly reading wrap up you'd want to see. The two options were either me giving rapid fire reviews of every book that I've read last year or tier ranking every book that I read last year. And I've done both ways before. I enjoy filming both types of videos, so I wanted to know which video you guys would rather watch. And tier ranking did win by a good bit, so I'm going to be tier ranking all of the 88 books that I read in 2025 today. So to give you guys the breakdown, explain all of my tiers and what they mean, I do have 6 this time around. At the very bottom we have Straight to Jail, Do Not Pass Go, Do Not Collect $200. These are my least favorite books that I read in 2025. Unfortunately, we did have a few 1 stars. They were books I probably should have DNF'd, but you know me, it is so hard for me to DNF a book because in my mind, I still want to know how a book is going to end. And there's always a part of me hoping that a book will get better, but the books in this category are going to be books that unfortunately didn't get better and were some of my least favorites of the whole year. A little above that, we have Just Disappointed. These aren't books that I absolutely hated and not my very least favorites, but they were books that I was maybe expecting more from and they let me down. Probably a lot of the 2-star reads are going to go in this category. And then above that, kind of the mid category, is You Were Good, I Was Waiting for You to Be Great. These are books that are very in the middle for me. They were perfectly fine. I probably don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. I would maybe recommend some of these books depending on what you're looking for, but overall these were just very so-so average for me. And then above that we have A Little Something Missing. I had a lot of books this year that I rated 3.75 stars, so I'm thinking a lot of the books with that rating, this is where I'm gonna put them. I know that sounds so super picky, but I'm just picky when it comes to my reads and how I rate them. And these are books that I would probably recommend to you guys and did enjoy overall, but ultimately there was just something keeping me from rating it a little bit higher, something about it that didn't make it a favorite. And then above that we have Big Slay. These are probably going to be my books that are rated highly in the 4-star range. Not quite a 5-star, but some of my favorites, still absolutely love them. Definitely would recommend them to you guys. And then at the very top we have The Goats. These are the greatest books that I read this year and of all time because they're going to be books that stick with me for a long time to come. That's to me what makes a book a 5-star and makes it a favorite. If I really feel like it impacted me and is really going to stick with me, those are the books that I'm putting in that category. So let's just jump right into it. Okay, the first book we have is The Conditions of Will by Jessa Hastings. This book is about our main character, Georgia, who ends up having to go back home to attend to a family matter, but she really does not get along with her family at all. They're constantly clashing, butting heads. They have completely different viewpoints on almost everything, every situation. So there is a lot of animosity. This book is exploring a lot of the family relationships and what those dynamics look like, which was so fascinating to read about. And then there's also a romance with a guy who is important to her brother, so that also causes some conflict. But I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was very well written, very interesting. It wasn't my absolute favorite thing ever. I've had a few 5-star reads from Jessa Hastings. This wasn't quite there, but I am still going to put this one in Big Slay. Rewind It Back by Liz Tomford is book number 5 in the Windy City series. It's the last book in that series, but she's doing a spin-off to the series this year, so it's kind of not over yet, but this is the unofficial end to the original books, I would say. And this book is a hockey romance following our main character, Rio. I was so highly anticipating his book from the moment I read the very first book in this series, so it's been long awaited for years for me. I was so excited, and I feel like when there's that much buildup and that much anticipation, there are really high expectations. Unfortunately, I feel like I was let down just a little bit. I did love this one, but it was one of those 3.75 star reads for me, so I'm gonna put this one in A Little Something Missing because I just was hoping for a little bit more out of it. The Ex-Wives Club by Sally Hepworth. This was the only little book we got from her this year, but she is thankfully releasing a full-length novel in 2026, which I am so thankful to have gotten the arc of because Sally Hepworth is one of my favorite thriller authors. So The Ex-Wives Club is a really tiny novella short story by her. It's following these ex-wives who were all married to the same man, and there's a little mystery. I really don't remember too much about this one, but since Sally Hepworth is one of my favorite authors, I know I enjoyed it in the moment. but since it wasn't long enough for me to really connect with anyone in the book or anything really happening, I'm going to put this in Waiting for You to Be Great, because it was definitely a very solid 3-star read for me. The Couples Trip is, I believe, a Swedish novel translated into English. It is a thriller about these couples that go on a hiking trip together, and I just found this one to be boring, not suspenseful at all. For a long time, this was in the running for my least favorite book of the year, but that trophy was since taken from it. I don't know, I'm in between putting this one and just disappointed and straight to jail, because I really didn't like anything about it, but I don't look back on it thinking that I absolutely hated it. But I didn't know anything about it going in, so it's not like there were expectations to be met where it disappointed me. I don't know. I'm gonna put it in straight to jail, because if I ranked every single book that I read this year from best to worst, this would probably be in my bottom 3. Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney was definitely an anticipated read for me because I loved Rock, Paper, Scissors by her, but I feel like the other books I've picked up by Alice Feeney since then haven't lived up to how much I loved that one, and just haven't been as good. That by far has been my favorite of hers. I was a little bit disappointed by this one, but I still think it was pretty good overall. So I'm going to put it in this mid category, Waiting for You to Be Great. What Alice Forgot by Liane Moriarty follows our main character Alice, who ends up getting in this accident where she forgets the last like 10 or so years of her life, and now in the present things are nothing like she remembered. So I felt like there were a lot of good life lessons in this book. I've read quite a few books by Liane Moriarty as well, and this wasn't my favorite of hers, but I still liked it. I feel like I would put this in a little something missing, because there were a lot of things that I loved about the book, and I definitely would recommend it. But I think if you want to read something by Liane Moriarty, there are other books of hers I would recommend picking up first. Adelaide by Genevieve Wheeler. I picked this one up because it always gets compared to one of my favorite books ever, which is Normal People. And I definitely understand the comparisons. So in Adelaide, we are following our main character Adelaide, and she's basically in this situationship, and it is really heartbreaking to read about because she's just giving so much and not getting the same in return. And I felt so much for Adelaide, and I wanted the best for her, so it really was frustrating to read about. This wasn't my favorite, but I did find it very heartbreakingly realistic, and I think it was a really good book overall. I think I'm going to put this one in Big Slay. Annie Bot is a sci-fi book. We're basically following our main character Annie, who is essentially a sex robot for this horrible man named Doug. And this book really makes you root for Annie. There were a lot of different kind of themes explored about autonomy. Definitely touched on AI, which I think is something very relevant to now, which was interesting to read about in fiction. I really liked this one. I think a little something was missing for me. I wish it would have gone a little bit deeper with some of the plot points and some of the character development, but overall it was really enjoyable. Confessions by Kane Minato is going immediately to Big Slay. I loved this book so much. It's a Japanese book translated into English, and basically we have this teacher who stands up at the front of her classroom. Her daughter has just been murdered, and she tells all of her students that she knows some of the students in the classroom are responsible for her daughter's death and that she's gonna get revenge. It is just so suspenseful. This book gripped me from the moment I started reading, and the structure, like the way the story is written, the writing style is just so captivating. One of the most fascinating books I've ever read. I highly, highly recommend. The Academy by Ellen Hildebrand. This one is co-written with her daughter, Shelby Cunningham. And it was a little bit different of a book for Ellen Hildebrand because it was her first departure from all of her books that she writes set on Nantucket. So this book was set at a boarding school in Massachusetts, and it kind of gave like Gossip Girl vibes. It was a lot of scandal, a lot of drama. You learn lots of secrets as you're following different students and staff at this boarding school, and I was so here for it. I was very, very taken with this big cast of characters. I think that is Ellen Hildebrand's strength. She writes a big cast of characters really, really well. They're all so diverse. They all bring something so interesting to the story. There's never one perspective I'm enjoying more than others. This one is going to go in greatest of all time. It was an easy 5-star read for me. Okay, Wayward, I believe, was one of the first books I picked up in October because I heard it had great witchy vibes. And I was really feeling books about witches this year, which you will see is kind of a theme. And on paper, I feel like this is not my usual kind of read at all. I feel like if someone just described the plot to me, I would think it sounds so boring. But the audiobook especially made it so captivating. We follow these 3 different women in 3 completely different time periods, and somehow they all have this connection to one another. All 3 of their stories were so fascinating. I, again, love the witchy vibes so much. This one is going in big slay. I remember the reason I didn't rate it higher than like a 4-star was because I wasn't the biggest fan of a part of the ending, but I will say it did make sense for the way everything kind of went. But overall, loved it. And another witchy read I fell in love with in 2025 is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. This book was such a surprise because I read from Grady Hendrix in the past and was just not a fan, so I did not think he would ever be an author for me. But again, I don't know, I just was drawn to the witchy vibe, so I think that's definitely why I picked this one up. And I absolutely loved the way the horror element was done in this book. Usually horror is not for me, but this one was just done so well because the horror was the witchiness and it just tied into all these themes of girlhood, of sisterhood. This book takes place in the 70s at this girls' home where young unwed mothers are sent away so they can have their babies in private and not bring shame upon the family, because it was very frowned upon at this time to be underage, unmarried, and pregnant. And they get their hands on a book of witchcraft and we follow what happens from there, and it was just so good to me. This was an unexpected, like I said, 5-star read. Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson was a reread. I wanted to continue on with the series, but a lot of the details were escaping me from the first time I read it, which, to be honest, even after reading it a second time around, not remembering all the details completely, but I do really like this series overall. It is a YA mystery. We follow our main character who goes to this kind of specialized boarding school where you really get to hone in and focus on whatever topic interests each student. So our main character, Stevie, is really interested in true crime. So she's going to this school to study the true crime case surrounding the history of the actual school, because the founder of the school's wife and daughter went missing and were kidnapped, and it was never really resolved. So she's trying to figure out what actually happened. I really love Truly Devious. I don't know if I love it enough to put it in big slay. I feel like it's not going to be an absolute favorite ever series for me, but I do want to continue on and I do find it very enjoyable. But I think it's kind of telling, since even after a reread, I'm not remembering all the details. There is just a little something missing for me. Look Closer by David Ellis I went into with high expectations because I feel like people I know personally have recommended this one. And it just sounded like it was going to be a twisty thriller that would keep me on the edge of my seat. And I will say this one had a lot of moving parts, but it was really well written to where I was never confused on anything. But I think the big reveal was a little bit anticlimactic. I was just a little bit underwhelmed. I think for me this is going to go in, it was good, but waiting for it to be great. Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, unfortunately, was a big disappointment for me. I gave this book somewhere in the 2-star range. I can't remember my exact rating, but it just did not work for me. It was so science heavy, and I went into it knowing it was a sci-fi book, knowing it was outside of my comfort zone, but I had faith that I would still love it because everyone else seems to love it despite not being a sci-fi person. That's what I've always heard when people recommend it, and it was just like reading a textbook for school. I just could not get into it. I felt like there was no emotion because I did not connect with our main character at all. I didn't like his sense of humor, so there was nothing really in the book that I was latching on to. And I also felt like the situation we were in was supposed to be so high stakes. He was trying to save the world, save all of humankind, and it was just giving boring. It did not read high intensity at all. This one's gonna go in just disappointed. I don't think I hate it to where I would want to put it in straight to jail, but definitely did not have a good time with it. Tender as the Flesh was on my TBR for a while. I finally read it, got it off the TBR this year. It is very much outside of my comfort zone. It's a dystopian horror novel. It takes place in this world where animals have contracted some virus, so they can no longer be eaten, no longer kept as pets. So everyone has kind of resorted to cannibalism, and we follow our main character who works at this human meat processing plant, which is just insane. This book was extremely graphic, vile, horrifying, all the things, all the trigger warnings. Definitely don't go into this one unless you think you can handle that subject matter. But I did enjoy it overall. I will say I went in expecting there to be some kind of crazy twist because that's what I'd heard. But I guess I misheard because there was absolutely no twist. I was left a little bit disappointed. I had some questions that I wanted answered. I was hoping we would get some resolution to a few things, but that did not happen. I think I'm going to put this one in a little something missing because overall I did really find it so fascinating. Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young is the sweetest, cutest, most heartwarming romance. I loved it so much. We follow Win and Bo, who end up meeting at a Halloween party. They have a one-night stand, and then they kind of go their separate ways and don't really talk to each other anymore. But something happens where they end up having to come back into one another's lives, and they form a friendship that turns into something more. This one is going in big sleigh. I absolutely get the hype for this one. I thought it was so sweet. The Wedding People, sadly, was such a disappointment for me. We follow our main character, and it is very dark at the beginning of the book because she's going to this hotel to end her life. But when she gets to the hotel, she realizes that everyone else there is there for a wedding. She's like the only hotel guest not affiliated with the wedding. So she ends up meeting the bride, and it follows the connection they form. But this book, despite knowing the subject matter going in and knowing it was going to be heavy, I still could never have anticipated how dark and how heavy it was. It really puts you in the mindset of our main character and why she wants to end her life, why everything was going so badly. It was just very heavy. It was a lot, and it put me in a really bad headspace, to be honest. So it just made the book feel a little bit too dark. I feel like there was some humor that tried to pick things back up and make it feel lighthearted, but I don't know, there were moments I enjoyed, but mostly things that I didn't enjoy, especially our character, the bride. Could not stand her. I found her to be just not very sympathetic. Like, she got to know our main character and understood what she was doing, and she just kind of made it all about her, and I wasn't a fan of that. So I'm putting this one in just disappointed, unfortunately. I wanted to love it as much as everyone else. And funny enough, it takes place at a wedding in Newport, Rhode Island. I'm wearing my Newport sweatshirt that I got when I went there for a wedding. So I think it would have hit more if I had loved that book. The Berry Pickers follows a family from Nova Scotia. They come to Maine every summer to pick berries. It's one of their main forms of income. There's a little bit of a mystery. We're following a lot of family dynamics. We get a couple of perspectives trying to figure out how they may or may not come together. And I feel like it was kind of obvious where everything was going, but I was still so fascinated by the way the story was told that it just kept me engaged the whole time. I especially loved the descriptions of food in this book. It really made me want to take a trip to Maine, even more than I already do because it is on my travel bucket list. I'm in between Big Sleigh and A Little Something Missing because I really liked this book, but I don't know if I would say I absolutely loved it. I feel like there could have been a little bit more suspense as far as the storyline went, but overall, really enjoyed it. We Used to Live Here was actually the very first book that I read this year, and I still think back on it all the time. It is a very trippy psychological thriller. We have our two main characters who are a married couple, and they flip homes. So they're currently in the house that they're renovating, and it is in a very remote location, kind of in the middle of nowhere. It takes a while to get to town. At the start of the book, we have our main character, Eve, who stays home while her wife, Charlie, goes to town to get supplies, I think because a bad snowstorm is coming. And while Eve is home alone, this family ends up coming to the door, and the husband and father of the family is like, "Hi, I know this is weird, but I used to live here. Would there be any chance that I could come in and show my family where I grew up?" One thing leads to another, and Eve ultimately ends up letting the family in, and very weird things happen from there. And I really liked this one. I think I'm going to put it in Big Sleigh. I remember when I first finished it, I think I gave this book 3.75 stars. It's one of those books where I feel like the more you sit with it, the more you appreciate it. And I went down all these rabbit holes on Reddit, and people had all these theories that I found so intriguing, and it made me really appreciate things even more about the book. So I feel like if I ever did a reread, I would pick up on so much that I missed the first time around. I feel like there was all kind of hidden symbolism and little Easter eggs. I do remember I wanted it to go a bit deeper with some themes. I feel like it could have been laid out a little more plainly and clearly, but I don't know if that was what the author was trying to do exactly. Maybe a little something was missing for me, because I do remember there being one specific topic that I wanted more of a deep dive into, but I still really, really loved it. Just comparing it to the other books in this category already, it's definitely my favorite, but I don't know if it's quite on the same level as the books I have in Big Slay. I think I'm feeling good about where I have it now. Okay, ACOTAR. I did start my ACOTAR journey at the very beginning of the year, and I definitely see the hype. A lot of people say that the first book is one of their least favorites of the series and that it gets so much better, but I really, really had a good time with ACOTAR. Like I said, I can see why people like it so much. It was a high 4-star for me. I think I gave it 4.25, maybe 4.5. So it is going in Big Slay. It definitely made me excited to continue on with the series. Anxious People by Fredrik Backman is about this group of strangers who are all in this apartment for an apartment viewing. And then across the street, there's also a bank robbery going on. The bank robber ends up escaping, taking cover in this apartment, and holding everyone in the apartment viewing hostage. So it becomes a kind of character study following all the different people in the hostage situation, as well as the bank robber's perspective. It is so interesting. Definitely took me by surprise. A lot of things I wasn't expecting. I really enjoy Fredrik Backman's writing. I feel like he has a lot of important things to say, and he weaves in some kind of humor that makes it a little bit more lighthearted, but sometimes that didn't always work in this book. I remember there were some things that I felt I wanted it to be a little more serious and not so, I don't want to say much of a joke, but there were definitely some moments that I felt could have been more sappy, and he kind of made them a bit more lighthearted, which I'm sure a lot of people would appreciate, but I could have done with it being more emotional even at times. But I'm still going to put it in Big Slay because I think this one was really, really great. I think I gave it 4.5 stars. The Wish by Nicholas Sparks. If you haven't yet seen my favorite books of the year video, go watch it because this is going to spoil that video. This was by far my favorite book that I read in 2025, and I read it all the way back at the beginning of the year. It was my very first Nicholas Sparks book. I just absolutely loved it. We follow our main character, Maggie, who runs this art gallery, but she ends up getting this really devastating medical diagnosis. So she ends up confiding in a guy that works for her in the art gallery, and she's reflecting on a past Christmas in her life that was very special and very memorable. And that ends up becoming our past timeline of the story. And oh my gosh, you guys, I was expecting this to be sad for one reason and ended up bawling my eyes out at the end for that reason and many others. It just completely blindsided me, but I was so invested. Absolutely obsessed. Definitely going in GOAT category. Margot's Got Money Troubles follows our very fun and quirky main character Margot, who ends up getting pregnant and is in desperate need of money. So she ends up starting an OnlyFans account, and we follow what happens when she does. There were so many fun aspects to this book that just made it so unusual in the best way. It's so different to a lot of other books that I read, and I'm really excited that it's getting adapted and the show is starring Elle Fanning. Also, side note, the audiobook of this is narrated by Elle Fanning, which is how I listen to it, and I would highly, highly recommend doing it that way. I love this one. I will say the only thing about it is it took me a little bit to get into, to the point where I was like, I really don't know if I'm enjoying this or if it's going to be for me. But the more I listened, the more I got invested, and I was so connected to all of our characters, especially Margot. I don't know if I want to put it in Big Slay or A Little Something Missing, because I did love it, but it did take me a bit to get into. I'm going to put it in Big Slay for now. I feel like if I reread that one, I would like it even more than I did the first time around, which is also the case, I feel, for We Used to Live Here. Let's keep it where it is for now. Okay. Heartstopper Volume 3. I love this series so much. These books make me so happy. They're YA graphic novels following Nick and Charlie and their relationship. It deals with a lot of heavy things, but it's just told in such a careful way. I feel like even when we're going through hard times in these books, it's still making me smile, and I just love all the life lessons. Just very sweet and uplifting and endearing. This whole series is a big slay for me. Checkmate by Ali Hazelwood is her first YA novel following two chess players. I really enjoyed this one. I feel like the romance wasn't my absolute favorite, but in the moment I had a good time with it. But Ali Hazelwood is one of my favorite authors, and I don't think this one is in my top favorites from her. I feel like there was a little something missing. Definitely had a good time in the moment, but not anything that's really sticking with me. Quicksilver, I have so many feelings about. There were moments reading this book where I hated it and thought it was so cheesy, so cringy. I didn't really like a lot of the characters. But then there were also moments where I was having a really good time with it. It was just a roller coaster, the whole thing. But it did make me want to continue on with the series, and I want to pick up Brimstone soon. I feel like I'm going to put this in the mid category because I did think it was good, but based around all the hype that it gets, I was expecting it to be great. In an Instant by Suzanne Redfern, I got as a blind date with the book, so I went in with no expectations because I'd never heard anyone talking about this book. And it basically follows the aftermath of a really bad car accident that this family and some of their friends are involved in. And it's told through our main character, who ends up not surviving the accident. So she's kind of in this in-between, kind of all-knowing point of view where she weaves in and out, kind of checking on her family and friends. But then we also get the other character's perspective through her eyes. It was just a really fascinating way of the story being told, and I thought it was really well executed. And it was definitely a hard read at times. There were some graphic scenes surrounding the accident, so definitely keep that in mind if you want to pick this up, but I would highly recommend it. I just found the dynamics between this family friend group so fascinating, and it really did show how much can change in an instant. So I would put this one in Big Slay. Lost and Lassoed by Lila Sage is part of the Rebel Blue Ranch series. These are cowboy romances, and I was highly anticipating this book because we kind of are introduced to the characters and their dynamic in book one, and they very much do not get along, so it's kind of like an enemies to lovers kind of story. But I found myself a little bit disappointed with their story. I just wanted more from them. I feel like I enjoyed them more as a side couple than seeing them as main characters. I think I'm going to put this in the mid category because it was good, but I was waiting for it to be great. Finale by Stephanie Garber is the final book in the Caraval trilogy, and I enjoyed that series so much. It is so magical, so whimsical. It follows these two sisters who get invited to compete in this competition that comes around once a year in this kind of unknown magical location. You don't really know about it until right before, if you're invited, where it's going to be. And there's all kinds of puzzles and riddles and clues, and it's like a big scavenger hunt filled with magic and whimsy, and it is a very fun time. And I remember being pretty satisfied with the way the trilogy wrapped up, but I don't think I enjoyed books 2 and 3 as much as I enjoyed book 1. Sometimes the magic system didn't always work for me because I felt like we were kind of making things up as we went along, and some things just felt a little bit too convenient. So I think there was a little something missing for me, but would recommend the series overall. The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune is a YA, I guess, fantasy magical realism kind of book. We follow our main character Linus, who is basically like a social worker in this world, and he gets this assignment to go visit this orphanage filled with all kinds of magical creatures, and they kind of feel a bit isolated because they're different. And there were some really sweet, endearing moments, lots of good themes and life lessons, but I also kind of felt like it was just a little bit too YA for me personally. There were also some things that I felt like it was so overly spelled out, like what the author was trying to do with this book and the point he was trying to make, where I feel like it could have benefited from being a little more subtle at times. So I don't think I enjoyed this one as much as the majority of people do. but I thought it was good overall, so I'm going to put it in Waiting for You to Be Great. Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter was another one that I went into with high expectations because I feel like everyone loves this book. And I haven't had the best luck with Lynn Painter in the past, so I was thinking this book would kind of be very telling if she is an author for me or not, since this is her most popular and beloved book. And unfortunately, it just didn't completely work for me all the way. I think it was a little bit too YA for me. There were definitely some scenes that I thought were super cute and read like a rom-com movie, but I never really got that invested in what was going on. And I wasn't the biggest fan of the romance. Like, I think it was perfectly fine, but nothing that I absolutely loved the way I think so many people do. So I think this one was good, but it wasn't great for me personally. Daydream by Hannah Grace is the third book in her hockey romance series. She is the author of Icebreaker, and this was another highly anticipated read for me because it follows one of my favorite characters that I could not wait to get his own book, and that is Henry. He is such a sweetie. He's a golden retriever, so I just was convinced I was going to love his book and it would be my favorite, but it just left me wanting more. I feel like I love that there wasn't a third act conflict in this book, but I also feel like there needed to be some more angst and tension, and it was just a little bit flat. I feel like there needed to be some kind of conflict to make this one a little bit more interesting, because the plot was lacking a bit for me. So unfortunately, I was just disappointed by this one. The Switch by Beth O'Leary definitely confirmed for me that Beth O'Leary is one of my favorite romance authors because this was just so heartwarming and so sweet to read about. We have our main character, Lena, who is a young woman. She works this corporate job, lives in London, and then we follow her grandmother, Elaine, who lives a very opposite kind of lifestyle, very quiet in the countryside, and they end up swapping places, and it follows kind of the life lessons that they learn, and there are lots of great themes in this book. I thought it was a really heartwarming story. This is definitely going in Big Sleigh. I would highly recommend, and I cannot wait to finish Beth O'Leary's backlist. Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber starts the spin-off trilogy to the Caraval trilogy. And I hear so many people say that they did not have a good time with the Caraval trilogy, but that they enjoyed the Once Upon a Broken Heart series so much more. So I was thinking that since I do love the Caraval series, I would love Once Upon a Broken Heart even more, and so I just had really, really sky-high expectations. And it's definitely the same kind of vibes. It's very magical, very whimsical. We have a little bit of romance, adventure, but I honestly just felt like it was Caraval 2.0. Like, I feel like it wasn't really much of a deviation from the original storyline, which was good because I liked the Caraval trilogy, but I think I was just expecting more, so a little something was missing for me with this book. And to be honest, it didn't really make me want to continue on with the series. I feel like I want to know what happens. I want to know if it's going to get better. But it didn't really entice me too much to continue on. The Lost Ticket by Freya Sampson. I feel like if I reread this book, I would love it even more than I did the first time around, which was a whole lot because this was another really heartwarming story. Our main character is a young woman who just moved to London, and she ends up meeting this older man on the double-decker bus. And he is telling her the story of back in the day when he was a young man, he met this woman. They were supposed to go on a date, but he ended up losing her number, and he feels like they are soulmates. So he has spent almost his whole life trying to find this woman. And our female main character is so taken by his story that she ends up helping him, and we follow this unlikely group of characters coming together along the way to also help this man. And I just really loved seeing people set aside their differences to come together for a common cause. This was such a big slate for me. And I cannot wait to read more from this author. It was so, so good. Emma of 83rd Street is a modern-day retelling of Jane Austen's Emma, and I had such a good time with this one. I thought it was such a great contemporary way to get a Jane Austen story. It's also set in Manhattan, and Emma was a very fun main character to follow. I will say the details of this one didn't really stick with me too much, but I remember really liking the romance, really liking the setting. I feel like there was a lot going on with this book, but it never felt like too much. and it's also the start to a series of Jane Austen retellings, and it did make me want to continue on. I think I would put this one in Big Sleigh. Every Summer After by Carley Fortune is a reread that I did this past year, and I reread it in preparation for the release of One Golden Summer, which is kind of the unofficial follow-up to this book. I definitely don't think I needed to do a reread, but I'm really glad that I did because it refreshed a lot of the details that were kind of fuzzy in my mind, and it was just great to get a reread of one of my favorite romances because I loved this just as much the second time around as I did when I first read it. It was a 5-star read then, it's a 5-star read now, so this is going in the GOAT category all the way at the top. Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. I know so many people were disappointed by this one. It was definitely a departure from what Emily Henry usually does because it leaned a little more literary fiction, but I would say the romance was still a big part of it. We kind of have these rival writers. One is pretty successful and well established in his career, and then our female main character is kind of trying to get her big break, so they are both competing to get the chance to tell this heiress's story who kind of went missing and stayed away from the public eye, but they have both found her and want to get the chance to tell her story because it could help both of their writing careers. And then of course there's a romance between the two of them in the process. I'm putting this one in Big Sleigh. I really did enjoy it. It's definitely not my absolute favorite of Emily Henry's, but I still rated it very highly. I think I gave it 4.75 stars, so it worked really well for me. All Roads Lead Here by Mariana Zapata. MZ is not really an author for me. The only book of hers I've really enjoyed is From Luke Off With Love. She's known as Queen of the Slow Burn, so she writes very slow burn romances, but to me, we don't get enough crumbs along the way to like build up the tension. So when they get together, it kind of feels like the relationship goes from 0 to 100 to the point where I personally feel like sometimes the couples read a bit more platonic than romantic. And there were things I liked about it. Like, I think it was definitely well written. I liked the Colorado setting. They went on some hikes, which I think was really cool to read about. Definitely atmospheric. But again, her romances just aren't for me. So I would say this one was good, but still waiting for it to be great. Julie Chan is Dead is a really, really fascinating thriller following twin sisters. One of the twins is an influencer who ends up dying, so the other twin takes over her life and pretends to be the influencer twin to kind of get a taste of that lifestyle. And some very weird things kind of happen when she learns more about what's going on in her sister's life. I liked this one. I would say a little something was missing for me. I gave it 3.75 stars. There were kind of some horror elements in the book, and it was a bit out there. It did kind of reel things back in, but there were some moments where I was like, okay, this is getting a little bit too crazy. But overall, I liked it and would recommend. Alex Approximately is a super cute summertime YA romance. We have our main character who is chatting anonymously to this guy online, and then the guy she's chatting to is from her hometown where her dad lives, and she's going to stay with her dad for the summer, so she's like trying to find the guy that she's talking to online in real life, and it follows what happens from there. And I really liked the trope of like talking to someone anonymously, kind of the mystery of what's going to happen when they meet in real life. I don't know if it's quite Big Sleigh level, because it's not one that I really think back on all the time. I feel like maybe I would put this one in A Little Something Missing just because it wasn't life-changing. It was a fun time in the moment, but the romance wasn't like brain chemistry altering. 7 Days in June by Tia Williams is such a good romance. So much yearning, so much emotion, so much heart. We follow two writers who actually met when they were in high school. They had kind of this magical whirlwind 7 days together in June, and then something happened and they haven't spoken in years, but when they meet as adults at this literary conference, they confront one another that both of them are writing books about the other person. and it follows what happens when they confront one another and reconnect. And this one is going in GOAT at the very top. This was a 5-star read for me. I absolutely loved it. It just did so many things so well. Usually books about authors or writers or books that are set in the publishing space, I feel can be too on the nose sometimes, but this one was just the perfect balance of not being too meta, but still telling a story in this world really, really well. And I loved the writing style. We got perspectives from both Eva and Shane in the past and present, and it was paced perfectly to where we got the perfect bits of information at the right times, I felt. And then we would get kind of backstory from the side characters and little tidbits here and there that just really added the perfect amount of depth and layers to the story. And I just thought everything in this book was done extremely well. Okay, Beg, Borrow, or Steal by Sarah Adams is the 3rd book in her When in Rome series, and to be honest, this series has not been my favorite. They are small town romances, and to me, I think the small town is not working for me. I think there's just not enough going on, so it gets a little bit repetitive. And I was really excited the way the dynamic between the 2 characters in this book was described. I thought it was going to be really good because we have these 2 rival teachers who are also neighbors, and then they end up kind of helping each other out, and it follows their romance, and it just sounded like it was going to be very angsty, but I didn't feel like there was enough about the plot to really pull me in and keep my attention. I am disappointed by this one, and unfortunately the whole series, to the point where I don't even know if I'm going to continue on. I know book 4 just came out, and I feel like it sounds good, but that's kind of what I've thought about all the other books too. And it seems like everyone else loves this series so much, which I love that for you if that's the case, but unfortunately not the case for me. The Hotel Nantucket by Elin Hilderbrand was my first Elin Hilderbrand book that I read this past summer, and I cannot believe it took me so long to pick up one of her books because I absolutely loved this so much. Her writing style is so incredible. This was just so amazing. I loved it. We followed this hotel that's just been built on Nantucket, and we're following this big cast of characters all surrounding the hotel. Some people work at the hotel, some people are guests. There's kind of a mystery storyline. We get a lot of backstories that kind of explain how the characters came to be where they are now at the hotel, and kind of how that ties in to different things that are happening. I feel like it's one of those books that I'm not going to be able to describe it in a way that sounds interesting, but just trust me, you have to give it a try. It was so, so good. It made me realize that I love books about hotels, and also made me want to plan a trip to Nantucket. If you can't tell, this was another 5-star from Elin Hilderbrand, and it's going in GOAT. Flu Plan by Trish Dollar was definitely an emotional but heartwarming as well romance. Our female main character at the beginning is grieving the loss of her fiance, and they were supposed to go on this voyage on their boat together, so she ends up taking the journey by herself as kind of a way to heal. And she ends up meeting a guy on her travels, and he is more experienced at captaining the boat than she is, so she kind of hires him to help her continue on with the journey. And it was really, really sweet. I knew going in this one was a romance, and I wasn't sure how I would feel, because usually when there is a main character who's just lost someone and they are entering a new relationship, I feel like sometimes it can be kind of iffy depending on how it's done. But it was done really, really well in this book. I loved following the 2 main characters and their journey, and just seeing all the different islands they got to go to. It was definitely a short book, but it still packed a punch, and I would highly recommend it for the summertime. So I'm putting this one in Big Sleigh. Listen for the Lie is a thriller with a podcast element, so I listened to this one on audio, and I'd heard such great reviews about it. The details are kind of escaping me, but I think our female main character was accused of murdering her best friend, and she's now going back to the town where all of this took place. And a lot of the people in this town have some animosity towards her because her name was never really cleared, but the case has now become a cold case, and so this podcaster is kind of reopening it, and so we're trying to figure out what actually happened, because our female main character claims she doesn't remember the details of that night. I feel like I was let down by this one. I don't know, like, it kept my interest. I would say it was good, but nothing spectacular. Problematic Summer Romance by Ali Hazelwood. I remember I had a few hesitations before going into this book. The first one is that this is the follow-up to Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood, which is probably one of my least favorites of her books, so I wasn't sure how I would feel about another book in the same series. And also, knowing that the title was Problematic Summer Romance, and then reading more into that and seeing that it's an age gap romance, and there was kind of a power imbalance, I was worried that it might actually be problematic, but none of those things ended up being the case. I absolutely love this book. Like I said, we follow our two main characters. There is an age gap between them. Our male main character is worried that there is a bit of a power imbalance, but I think they really are such a good match for one another. We learn more about their dynamic through past chapters. We see that they kind of have feelings for each other but don't want to cross any boundaries. Our male main character is our female main character's brother's best friend, so it's brother's best friend trope. They're both spending the week together in Italy for a wedding, and we follow what happens between them as the events of the wedding week transpire. And I gave this book 5 stars, you guys. I just absolutely loved everything about it. Normally, Ali Hazelwood writes a very kind of academic setting, so this was a bit different, taking place in Italy, but I hope she writes more books set in a different setting because I loved how it was done. I just thought the romance was filled with so much tension, so much angst. I was rooting for them, and it was just such a great time. Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan is one that I heard a lot about this year, and it really intrigued me because our couple that we're following in this book was actually previously married and now they're divorced. So I wasn't sure how I was going to feel reading about two characters that aren't together anymore, and it just really follows them co-parenting. They both run a restaurant together, so we follow them and that dynamic. But I loved it even more than I was expecting. It went in a direction I was not anticipating at all, but I mean that in the best way possible. And I don't want to give away what I mean by that because it was quite a pleasant surprise for me, not knowing what was going to happen. So I would put this one in Big Slay. The Compound was a very interesting kind of lit fic dystopian book, and it was described to me as being like if Love Island was a thriller, and I would say that is pretty accurate. We basically follow this group of contestants, half guys, half girls, and they're doing Love Island type challenges, but they're more, I don't want to say life or death, but they're pretty intense. Like at the start, they really have no supplies. So when they do a challenge, they're competing for things like food, sunscreen, water, basic necessities. Crazy the things that they are really competing for. So it's kind of like Survivor, I guess, in a way. But there's also the romance aspect to the competition where they couple up. And it was just really fascinating. We do only follow one female main character the whole time. And I kind of wish we got different perspectives. I think it would have been really fascinating if we follow maybe a couple other contestants as well. Maybe some of the behind the scenes crew filming the show. Even some of the viewers at home. There were some things I just wanted more insight on. But the things that we did get, I was so fascinated by. So I'm going to put this one in Big Slay. Life's Too Short by Abby Jimenez. If you guys don't know by now, Abby Jimenez is one of my favorite authors. And this is the third and final book in the very first trilogy that she wrote, the Friend Zone series. And I wasn't sure what to expect from this book. Our two main characters live in the same apartment complex, and they kind of have a not so meet cute because our female main character is taking care of a baby. And our male main character comes over because the baby is crying nonstop and he can hear it through the walls and it's keeping him up. And he kind of steps in and helps our female main character out because he is so annoyed. He just wants to sleep. He's sick of hearing the baby cry. And he kind of learns more about our female main character and her life, and it follows their relationship. And our female main character is also a YouTuber. Definitely on a much bigger scale than me, but I felt like I still had that connection to her. And I think Abby Jimenez just writes romance so well with the perfect blend of comedy, emotion. I just love everything about her stories. This one wasn't quite a 5-star, but it was close. I'm going to put it in Big Slay. I remember there was one part to the conflict resolution that I didn't feel like it was super realistic, and I didn't absolutely love how it was handled, but everything else about it was almost perfection. Don't Let Him In by Lisa Jewell is her latest release from last year. I was excited and highly anticipating this one because her release from 2024 I gave 5 stars. So I was hoping for another highly rated book for me from her. Basically, at the beginning of the book, we have this man named Patty Swan who passes away, and another man named Nick ends up reaching out to Patty's family, his former wife and daughter, and is like, hey, I'm sorry for your loss. Patty and I were friends. Let me know if you need anything. And he kind of ends up coming into their lives, and we follow what happens from there. And at the beginning of this book, I was super confused because everything felt very convoluted, and it took a while to get into. But I think it was well worth it once I understood what was happening, because we get a lot of perspectives and I didn't really understand who was who and what was happening, but it does all start to come together and make sense. And this book had one of the most satisfying endings I've read in a long time. I'm not putting this one in Big Slay. It wasn't quite on that level. I would say a little something was missing because it took a bit to get into and I really had to push through, but I'm glad that I did. I think it was definitely worth it. Business Casual by B.K. Borison is the 4th and final book in her Love Light Farm series. So this is a series of 4 books. Each of the 4 books takes place in one of the 4 seasons, and we started with the Christmas winter book, which I absolutely loved so much. I thought that book did everything so well, but unfortunately from there, I feel like Love Light Farm set up everything so well and told everything we needed to know about this small town. Every book after that just hasn't worked for me and has fallen so flat. I feel like it's gotten a little bit repetitive, and all the side characters from book 1 that are now the main characters in books 2 through 4, I really don't think they bring enough to the table to be main characters. I know that sounds super harsh, but I've just been bored by the rest of the series. I think Business Casual is one of my least favorites. Not quite straight to jail level, because it was nice being back in this small town that I'm familiar with characters that I've grown to love, but I was disappointed by it and by the series overall. The Love of My Afterlife was so good. I read this to kick off spooky season because it's kind of a romance with a bit of a paranormal aspect. Our main character at the start is in a freak accident, ends up dying, going to the afterlife, and she meets her kind of like afterlife coordinator. And when she's in the afterlife waiting room with the coordinator, she meets this guy. They have this instant connection, and he ends up only being in the afterlife for a minute, and then he goes back to Earth, and she's like, no, wait, he could have been the love of my life. And so the coordinator that she was working with is like, okay, I'll make a deal with you. You can go back to Earth. She's like, I have faith that he is your soulmate and I love a good romance, so you have 10 days to get him to kiss you, fall in love, and if you do that, you can stay on Earth with him, but if not, you're getting sent back here. So we follow her journey, and it definitely takes some unexpected turns, but I feel like if you're a romance reader, you can see where it's going, but I still loved it so much. This is a very big slay for me. I cannot wait to read more from this author in 2026. The Woman in Cabin 10. This was the book that was in my head when I was making the straight to jail category. This is one of my least favorite, if not my least favorite book that I read this year. It was so disappointing, and I thought I was gonna love it because I feel like I've heard great reviews for it. It was adapted into a movie starring Keira Knightley, so I really didn't think I would hate it as much as I did. Basically, our main character is this journalist who gets a job assignment to do a write-up of this little boutique cruise liner. So she's on the ship with all these famous people, and she witnesses what she thinks is someone getting thrown overboard, but no one really believes her because everyone who's supposed to be on board is accounted for, so it follows the mystery from there. And my main issue with this book is that there were so many characters and they were never fully fleshed out or explained, so they all felt like the same exact person. I feel like we also kind of found out everything we needed to know really early on, but then there was this one piece of information we got at the beginning of the story, which is why I kept reading, because I thought that was going to tie into another little kind of twisty part of the reveal, and it just never got brought back up again. So I was like, what was even the point of that? It gave absolutely nothing. It was pointless, and I really hate when books do things that feel like they did them for no reason at all. I need things to tie back in for it to be enjoyable to me personally. So this was just not thrilling and I had a really bad time reading this. I regret not DNFing, so this is going in straight to jail. Finding Grace is so interesting. I heard one review of this book and it was enough to intrigue me to pick it up. Basically, we follow this married couple at the beginning and they have one child together. The wife desperately wants another child, but they're having trouble getting pregnant again. So they are using a surrogate mother, and at the beginning of the book, they are on this family vacation. I think it's around Christmas time, and the mother is like glued to her phone because she's waiting to hear back from the company that the surrogate mother works for to see if the pregnancy was successful. And the husband is like kind of over it. He's like, listen, you have been glued to your phone. Let's have a nice family vacation. You know, let's pay attention to the child that we do have and just enjoy our time on this vacation as a family. And then a very catastrophic event happens soon after that, and it follows the aftermath. So this book has a little bit mystery, a little bit romance. I feel like part of this book I knew what was happening and I knew what was supposed to happen and what was gonna happen. I was just kind of like waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I also feel like the romance in this book I wasn't always completely behind and rooting for, which if you read it you will know why, and I'm sure we'll feel the same way. But I don't know, it was interesting. I feel like I'm between good, not great, and a little something missing. I think I'd put it in a little something missing because this was a 3.75 star for me. And I think I just wanted a bit more suspense out of the storyline, or even more of a backstory before this plot altering event happens to really make me feel more invested. I think would have bumped up my rating a little bit. Okay, The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. These are YA mysteries. It's a trilogy. I feel like I'm one of the last people to finally pick up this series, but I was really excited because I've heard great things about it. And basically we have our main character Avery, who at the start of the book is written into this man's will, and she goes to the reading of the will with the family, but it's very weird because she doesn't know any of them. So now she's kind of teaming up with some of the family members to solve some of these riddles left by the old man. There are all these clues and puzzles to uncover to try and understand things and understand why she was written into this will and what her connection to this family possibly might be. This was a disappointment for me. I feel like it was just a little bit too YA, so I was not the target audience. I also feel like I've heard people talk nonstop about the love triangle in this book, and there were a lot more brothers in the family than I was expecting. I feel like I always only hear about 2, but there were about like 4, maybe 5, and to me they all read like the same exact person, so I couldn't differentiate any of them, and I was never rooting for the romance. That is definitely like a pretty small subplot to the story, so don't go in it for that if you are expecting more out of that storyline, because I definitely thought there would be more to it, but I was excited for the mystery. I would like to uncover the mystery to this book, but I don't know if I want to read 2 more books to figure things out. I really could see myself just Googling and spoiling it for myself to figure out what happened, because I'm not really invested enough to read 2 more books. But I will say the books do read quickly. They are very fast-paced. Each chapter ends on a cliffhanger, so they're easy reads, and it was a fun time. I don't completely hate it, but I think I was disappointed. But I would say overall it was good. I think I'm being a little bit harsh on it. Just definitely nowhere near great. Final Girls by Riley Sager is his debut novel. I completed Riley Sager's backlist this year. He is one of my favorite thriller authors. This book follows 3 different girls who were deemed final girls because they were the sole survivors of different massacres they were a part of. And at the beginning, one of the final girls dies, so the other 2 final girls end up coming together, trying to uncover different things, and we learn some secrets along the way, trying to figure out who we can trust. I definitely liked this one a lot. I would say there was a little something missing for me. I really was not a fan of our main character because she made the dumbest decisions possible, to the point where I was like, I don't know how this girl survived a massacre out of all of her friends, because she is not giving final girl energy. She is giving idiot energy. Lessons in Chemistry is a historical fiction book. It's set in the 1950s. We follow our main character, who is a chemist, and at this time especially, she was really the only woman in her field. And we end up following her as she stars in her own cooking show, where she tries to reach women through the TV, through this cooking show, and teach them about chemistry through her cooking. And this book took me by surprise, and I have kind of mixed feelings about it because it was not what I expected. It definitely took a while for the cooking show aspect of the book to kick in. Like, not until the second half is when that part of the story comes into play. And the first half was kind of like a romance between her and someone she meets. And then it was just a lot of build-up and backstory that threw me off. I just wasn't expecting that. So I think once we got to the cooking show part of the story in the second half of the book, it picked up a lot for me. But I wasn't the biggest fan of the first half, and I also feel like some of the characters were written in a very caricaturish way. Like, it was obvious they were just there to drive home a point. So I think I put this one in a little something missing. I did like it. I think to start out, it just wasn't what I was expecting. The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. This one follows our main character, Theo, who is a young boy at the start, and he is in an art museum with his mother when there is an attack on the museum that his mother does not survive, but he does, and we follow many years of his life after that as he's kind of grieving the loss of his mother. We see his life take many different paths and see many different types of characters come in and out of the story and in and out of his life, and it was very fascinating to follow. It was definitely a really good portrayal of grief, I think. I don't think I enjoyed it quite as much as The Secret History, but I do think it was extremely well written. It was a very long book, but because of that, I got to know Theo's character really, really well, and I felt very connected to him, so I would put this one in Big Sleigh. The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah is a historical fiction book. It takes place during World War II, and we're following the relationship between two sisters. And on paper, this book has everything I love in books because I love sister relationships and I'm so fascinated by World War II history, so I thought this was going to be an easy 5-star for me. And I did love it, but there were moments where I just felt like it was a little bit too cliche, and it was a very long book, but I never really felt deeply connected to our characters. Like, they didn't always come to life to me. They felt fictional. I felt like I knew I was reading a book the whole time. I never felt like I was swept up into the story. But I did really enjoy it, and by the end, it definitely was a tearjerker. Redeeming Six by Chloe Walsh is the 4th book in the Boys of Tommen series. These are romances set in Ireland. We're following this friend group. There are some family members involved, and the male main characters of the series are all athletes, so the numbers in the titles refer to their jersey number on their team, and then we follow like different dynamics, different couples. The first 2 books in this series follow one couple, Johnny and Shannon, and then books 3 and 4 follow another couple, Aoife and Joey. So this book is the last book in Joey and Aoife's story, and Johnny and Shannon have such a huge place in my heart. Books 1 and 2 in this series were like 6-star reads for me. I absolutely love those books so much. And I love books 3 and 4. Joey and Aoife have a very special place in my heart as well. But I don't love their story quite as much as I did Johnny and Shannon's. I feel like it got a little bit repetitive and we were kind of going around in circles sometimes. These books deal with very heavy topics, so make sure you look up trigger warnings if you're thinking about picking them up. And part of the reason we went around in circles in this book, I can completely understand because of what the characters are going through. But it did get to be a bit much at times because I felt like they were just constantly having the same fight over and over. But this is still such a big slate for me because these characters, I just feel so much for them. These books are very, very emotional and I'm very attached. But again, this wasn't quite a 5-star read for me the way that books 1 and 2 were. Winter Street by Ellen Hildebrand is a Christmas book that I randomly heard about, had no idea that she had books set around the Christmas season. So I was excited to pick up another Ellen Hildebrand book after loving the first 2 books of hers that I read. So I read a summer book of hers, a fall book, and I was like, perfect, a winter book to set off the Christmas season. And this was good. It was a start to a series. We follow this family The dad in the family runs this inn on Nantucket, and there's some kind of drama, secret, scandal, just lots of different things going on within this family. And it kind of read like a sitcom where everyone in the family kind of has their own thing going on and you see how it all ties into one another. But I never really felt especially connected to this one the way I have the other books I've read of Elin Hilderbrand's. So I would say this one was good. I'm waiting for it to be great. There are 2 more books in this Winter Street series, and to be honest, I don't know if I want to continue on. Like, it was a good time in the moment, but nothing really that special. The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches was yet another witchy read that I picked up this year, and I started this one during spooky season. Didn't quite finish it before it was Halloween, so I kind of put it down, but then I did want to finish it up, so that is one of the last books that I completed this year. Basically, we have our main character who is a witch, and she is kind of part of this society of witches that meet once a month or so, and they are kind of told to keep their powers hush-hush, not to tell anyone they're witches, because bad things could happen if people find out. But then someone does find out she's a witch, and she actually ends up getting a job offer from this family who have 3 little witches in their household who are in need of a tutor. So she ends up coming to this home to meet the girls and see if she is a good fit for them, and we follow things from there. And it was definitely as cute and cozy as everyone says, but to be honest, I don't feel like it was the most impactful thing ever. Like, it wasn't a new favorite read for me. So I think I hoped I would love it a little bit more than I did. I feel like if I maybe hadn't left it for a while and had read the whole thing in a more continuous time frame, like during spooky season, I do think maybe I would have enjoyed it a bit more than I did. But I'm going to put this one in just a little something was missing for me. But overall, I did really like it. The last one, At the Wedding, kind of follows the relationship between a daughter and father who are estranged from one another. And finally, after years of not speaking, the daughter picks up the phone and calls her father to let him know that she is engaged and is going to be married. So we follow what happens when the father kind of comes back into the daughter's life. And once he gets to know the groom and his family, he's kind of sketched out by them and starts to question some of the things they might be involved in. This one definitely took some unexpected turns. It kept my interest the whole time. And overall, I liked it. But it was kind of just in the middle for me. This one was good. I wouldn't say it was anything great. I can't ever really see myself including it in a recommendations video, but I don't regret reading it. Like, it was an enjoyable time in the moment. But I do want to read Hidden Pictures by the same author because people seem to love that book even more. Bound by Ali Hazelwood is a recent release from her, one of quite a few that she put out last year. I think this one was only released on audiobook because that's how I listened to it. This one was a novella, so pretty short and sweet. A lot of the details are escaping me, and to be honest, didn't really stick with me. But I know our main characters are involved in forgery. They're really skilled at creating like forgeries of very important documents and kind of historical artifacts and things like that. And that's how the 2 romantic interests come into one another's lives. And then we kind of learn more about our male main character, and to be honest, I was more interested in the forgery aspect to the story because I've never read anything like that before, and I did find it fascinating. But then the storyline kind of took a turn when we learned more about our male main character, and I didn't absolutely love the direction it went because I feel like where it went is a bit oversaturated, and I read so many books like that, which I don't really want to spoil what it is that happens. It might say in the synopsis if you're curious, but I'm gonna say I was a bit disappointed by this one. I love Ali Hazelwood, she's one of my favorite authors, but I prefer her women in STEM novels. Okay, and then I continued on with my ACOTAR journey. I finally picked up book 2 actually a few weeks ago, and I'm now on book 3. I'm in the middle of it still. I had such high expectations going into A Court of Mist and Fury because I feel like everyone says this is their favorite of the series. This is when everything kind of changes and the series picks up and we meet a lot of new interesting characters. This book is definitely more romance heavy, so I definitely thought it would be for me. But to be honest, I think I found the storyline of book 1 more intriguing. I'm not especially obsessed with the romance. I like it just fine. but it's not my favorite ever, and I'm not the biggest fan of the world building and the way information is given to us. I don't read a lot of fantasy, especially not romantasy, so I can't help but compare it to the one other popular romantasy series I've read, which is the Empyrean series. And to me, that book is set at a war college, so I think the way information is given makes more sense because they're in kind of a learning environment. So I feel like the classroom is a fitting time to info dump, and that's how we learn a lot of things. And in ACOTAR, I feel like so far all the pieces don't really fit together perfectly to me right now. Maybe down the line more pieces are going to come in that kind of fill in the gaps, but I don't know. I just don't absolutely love it as much as I thought I would, but I've still had a really good time. I honestly think I liked the first book a little more than book 2, but I like the characters that we meet better in book 2. So I'm kind of torn. Even though it seems like I was just kind of trashing this book, I feel like I would probably still put it in Big Slay, even though there is a little something missing for me. Hot take, but I think I'm feeling more like putting this in A Little Something Was Missing, because I really did just want more out of the world building. Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. This is a nonfiction book. I love John Green. I loved his books ever since I was in middle school. And now he's coming out with some more nonfiction. I read The Anthropocene reviewed by him a few years ago and found it so fascinating. So I kind of thought this book would be similar formatting to that book, where he takes the topic of tuberculosis and kind of ties it to different things. And it started out that way, and I was so interested in all the little kind of trivia facts we were getting because there was so much about tuberculosis that I didn't know. It really opened my eyes to learning more about this disease, and it was really, really fascinating in parts. And there were little anecdotes and like people he met in real life that I was so connected to and invested in those parts of the story. But then there were more parts that I feel got a little bit tedious when we got into more of like the scientific technical things that just didn't interest me as much. And I don't want to really put a rating to this because it is nonfiction, but just based on my reading experience, it was a bit mid for me, to be honest. I'm going to put this in. It was good, but not great for me personally, just because there were parts that intrigued me, but then other parts that I was just not really interested in at all. But I know so many people have rated that book very highly. I personally would recommend The Anthropocene reviewed by him. To me, that had more of the like pop culture references and just learning moments that I found so fascinating in a nonfiction, as opposed to this that was a bit too scientific at times. Okay, and then Christmas at Reedy Falls is a Christmas book set in my hometown. I was really excited to read this book because obviously it's set where I live. The main setting is this hotel that I've been to many times. I've gone there for dinner, for drinks. It is a very well-known hotel in my city, so I was really, really excited about this book, and I picked it up around Christmas time and unfortunately did not enjoy it one bit. This book was also in the back of my mind when I was creating the straight to jail category, and I feel so bad because I always want to support a local author. This book is set in my hometown, so I feel like I have that connection to it, but my issue with this book, guys, is we have our two main characters. They're both journalists. One is a photojournalist, one is the writer, and they have been assigned to do a write-up of this new hotel that's just been built, which, like I said, is an actual hotel, so that part of it was really interesting to read about. But they literally fall in love after like one interaction, and if you don't want to know what happens in this book at all and think you might read it, skip ahead. I'll put a timestamp on. But you guys, they literally get engaged after knowing each other for like 4 days. And there were so many random details in this book that just added nothing to the story. Like, I thought it would kind of play a part in something else or build upon another fact that we learned, but it just had absolutely no relevance. And there was this kind of mystery subplot that was thrown in that I thought would also tie into the ending, where someone like steals something at the hotel, but then we never figure out who it was, what happened. So I'm like, what was even the point in mentioning that and having this whole mystery subplot if you're not gonna say who robbed the hotel or like what significance that had to do with anything? It frustrated me so much, you guys. Mostly just how insta-lovey it was. And the way the characters spoke also, it was so bizarre because it was like they used really weird slang. It was almost like they were young people but set in like the 50s or something. The way they spoke was just so weird. So sad to do this, but straight to jail. Cookie Spooky Love, I actually got the arc of this a few months ago and I needed to read it before the end of the year because I had a deadline coming up to complete it and I wanted to give it a review. And it's actually the second book in a duology, which I tried starting the first book in the duology and just couldn't really get into it. So I'm like, whatever, I'm just going to try to read book 2 without reading book 1 first. And I did feel like I understood everything that was going on. We're following this group of ghost hunters and they have this little assignment to kind of scope out this mansion and try and get rid of the ghosts because the current owners are being haunted, and there's a little bit of a love triangle too, so it's kind of like romance, mystery. I liked that it had a little bit of everything. It definitely wasn't my favorite, like I never really got super invested in anything happening. I liked the combination of the like paranormal ghost hunter aspect with the romance, and it was a very fun, unique cast of characters to follow. But it was a little bit too silly quirky at moments. I'm gonna say this one was good, but waiting for you to be great because it was like a 3.5-star read for me. Iron Flame I did a reread of at the beginning of 2025 in preparation for the release of Onyx Storm, which I still have not read and I know I need to, but I'm so glad I did a reread because Iron Flame for me, this is kind of a hot take, it is like a 6-star read. I absolutely love it. To me, it's just so fascinating. I feel like something significant happens in every single chapter, and I love when a book feels so purposeful, like every single page has a point, has a purpose, adds to the story. I feel like it was just the perfect blend of fantasy, romance, good plot, good storyline, good characters, good romance, just everything about it to me was done perfectly and in the perfect combination, and I am so glad I reread and picked up on all the little details that I missed the first time around. I need to read Onyx Storm very soon. I'm hoping that I love it the same, but Iron Flame is obviously a GOAT for me. Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. This was his release from 2024. It takes place in the 90s. It's set in this kind of like suburban, summertime, nostalgic setting. So I really liked the vibes of it. We follow our main character in kind of 2 different timelines. We see that when he was a young boy, he was camping out in his backyard with his best friend Billy. And when they woke up, Billy was missing and he just vanished. No one knows what happened to him. So that's what we're trying to figure out in present day as our main character is an adult and going back to his childhood home. I really loved this one. I would say it's not my #1 or like even my top favorites of Riley Sager's, but it's probably like my 4th favorite of his. So I would put this one in Big Slay. I just think it was really interesting. He kind of switched it up with this book because normally Riley Sager writes from a female main character's perspective, but in this book I liked that we got a male main character's perspective, and in addition we got different POVs from people in this neighborhood, so I liked seeing a bigger cast of characters and getting their perspectives to add layers to the story. I just think it was done really, really well. The Paper Palace is a perfect summertime read set at Cape Cod. We follow our main character who is married and she's coming back to the place where she goes every summer at Cape Cod, and her childhood love is also there, and it follows kind of a love triangle situation. The subject matter wasn't my favorite. There is some infidelity in this book, which I'm never a fan of, but I was so blown away by how incredible the writing was. I just thought it was truly astounding. We get past timelines in this book that I think are perfectly paced and weave into our present day timeline and add the perfect bits to what's going on to really flesh out these characters. And I just felt so deeply for everyone in this story, despite them not making good decisions. It felt very realistic, and so I was really emotionally invested in what was happening, even though I didn't always love the decisions being made. I think really the writing is what did it for me. And at times I thought this could be a 5-star, but I think a lot of our characters were just so unlikable that it's holding me back, but it was a big slay. The Happy Ever After playlist by Abby Jimenez I think is probably my favorite from her Backlist trilogy. Of the 3 books in that series, I just really love this one so much. We have our female main character, Kristen, and at the start of the book, she ends up coming across this dog, and she is desperately trying to find the owner. And when she does, she ends up kind of talking to the owner for a bit, and we follow them texting back and forth and kind of their relationship that forms from there. And it was just so good to me. Like, some of the best banter, some of the best tension. I was so obsessed with the romance. I will say, I think I'm going to put this one in Big Slay, but there was a little something missing for me in terms of the ending. I just felt like the third act conflict didn't really fit with the characters and kind of felt inconsistent from how they behaved in the beginning. I feel like what happened in the conflict was so out of character that it took my rating from being a 5-star to a 4.75, but it was still really close. That was like the only thing that bothered me about the book, so it is a Big Slay. Pictures of You by Emma Gray. This follows our female main character who gets in an accident, and her husband does not survive the accident, but she has lost a lot of her memory, and she ends up meeting someone from her past who is trying to help her piece things together. This one I heard such great things about, and I honestly just was quite bored by it. I feel like my biggest issue is that the story was really slow, and the way it was told I wasn't a fan of. I feel like we would get a huge chunk of chapters from the past timeline and then a huge chunk of chapters from the present day timeline, and it was like as soon as I was kind of getting invested in one, we would switch. So I just wish it would have almost been like an every other chapter past present kind of situation, or just told in some other way that made the story a little bit more fast-paced. There were a few moments I enjoyed, but overall I was just disappointed because the things I liked about it were few and far between. So it just didn't really work for me. Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose follows these siblings who end up going to their childhood home after their mother passes away to kind of go through everything and get the house ready to sell. And they end up coming across some home videos that bring up some past memories and kind of reveal something that happened in the past. Geneva Rose's books for me are usually in the 3-star range. I feel like I keep coming back to them because they hook me right away and they entertain me the whole time. But then I'm usually let down by the reveal or the twist. With this one, it was kind of the opposite scenario where it took me a while to get into, so I never got invested, but I did think the twist was pretty well done. I wasn't really expecting it until right before it happened. I don't know, I'd probably say I'm a little bit disappointed by this one. I can't see myself really reading anything more from Geneva Rose after this because I've never really absolutely loved anything that I've read from her. Around by Thomas McFadden is actually written by my brother. This is a horror book following a group of teens who set off into the woods to find this haunted house. And supposedly in this haunted house there is a demon that will kind of uncover some of the secrets of your unconscious mind. This one is definitely going in Big Slay. It was so fun to kind of follow my brother on his writing process and see everything come to fruition. I know he worked so hard on this. Horror is not my usual genre, but I still absolutely loved it. I thought it was very well written, very descriptive. I could visualize everything that was happening as I was reading. It felt like a movie coming to life. I really enjoyed how diverse the cast of characters were and kind of seeing some of their backstories, and there were even some little subplots with some of the side characters that tied into our main plot, which I found to be so interesting. So I am really proud of my brother. I would highly recommend his book. I had such a good time reading it. I was literally filming for so long I didn't realize it was starting to get dark, but our next book is Deep End by Ali Hazelwood. This is a college sports romance between a diver and a swimmer at Stanford. I remember I was nervous going into this one because everyone was talking about how crazy spicy it was. This book does deal with kinks, so I was afraid it might be even a bit too much for me as someone who loves reading spice. But I really liked how this one was done. I feel like the characters had so much depth and there was so much going on with them outside of the romance, and we also got to see a lot of this romance outside of just the physical aspect. So when we did get more intense with the physical side of their relationship, it really didn't bother me because I felt like it made sense and kind of fit in with how their relationship was progressing. I will say, for how much I loved everything that was going on in this book, towards the end it got to be a bit too much, and I didn't like that it was taking the focus off the romance. I feel like the book should have kind of like been funneling to where by the end we were really just focusing on the romance, and it kind of went in the opposite direction where by the end there was just so much going on. I feel like there were all these loose ends that were suddenly developing out of nowhere, and I just wanted the focus to be on the romance because I loved it so much. But I would still say this is a big slay. With a Vengeance by Riley Sager is his latest release. The whole thing takes place on this train in the 1940s over the course of one night. Our main character, Anna, ends up luring this group of strangers onto the train who have all wronged her and her family in some way, and she's trying to get revenge. I liked the vibes of this one, but I didn't really connect with it. I sometimes feel like when a setting takes place in a very limited area, like it was all over the course of this one night on this train, there wasn't too much that could be done. I feel like it got a little bit repetitive. It wasn't a big cast of characters, so I feel like there weren't too many directions the story could go. I would say this one was good, but personally for me, just not great. It was kind of lacking in suspense, and I feel like the ending was also a bit messy and all over the place. Like, I couldn't even tell you now what happened in the end because there was just a lot going on. The Favorites by Lane Fargo follows two ice dancers, Kat and Heath. They meet at a young age and kind of bond because they both have pretty traumatic upbringings, but they both love the sport of ice dancing, so they become ice dance partners. They're also friends, and then they become lovers, so we follow their relationship through it all. Ultimately, their careers take them to the Olympics, and they really have a tumultuous relationship with the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. So the climax of the story takes place at one of their Olympic events that kind of ends their partnership, ends their relationship, and we're getting perspectives from some of their rivals, some of their friends, their coaches, the media, and then we also get Kat's perspective as she's trying to set the record straight. And this was one of my favorite reads of the year. It is going all the way to the top in GOAT. This was just so good to me. The drama, the scandal, I was so intrigued. Every chapter ends on a cliffhanger. Each chapter was crazier than the last, and everything felt so real to me. Nothing felt fictional about this book at all. There were so many things about this book where I was like Googling, oh, I wonder what their coach is doing now. I wonder what their training facility looks like, because I was forgetting that I was reading a fictional book. It felt completely real to me, and following Heath and Kat's journey as ice dancers and as friends and lovers was so good, and I could not put this book down, and I feel like it's one that I would want to do a reread of at some point. The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave is allegedly a thriller following our main character whose husband goes missing, and she ends up getting a note that says protect her, which she assumes is referencing her stepdaughter. So she ends up taking matters into her own hands and trying to find out what happened to her husband. And I just found this one so boring and uneventful, and I feel like nothing exciting happened. Our main character was pretty bland, so I was just disappointed by this one. I didn't hate it because I feel like there were moments that pulled me in, but overall, I did not really like it. The Fall Risk by Abby Jimenez is a novella set around Valentine's Day, and I was so impressed that she could really develop such a great story with a great romance in a short amount of time. But I feel like I did want a little bit more time with the characters. It was not enough time for me to really be obsessed with this book. So I think that was the only thing that was missing for me, was that it could have been a little bit longer. Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez was one of my favorite reads of the year. I know that's a hot take because this one got very mixed reviews, but it really worked for me. This book follows Samantha and Xavier. They end up meeting when Samantha takes her kitten in to see Xavier, who is a veterinarian, and they get off on the wrong foot, but Xavier makes it up to her by taking her on the best first date ever. But then they come to find out, because of their life circumstances, that they're not going to be able to stay together. So it follows them trying to overcome all of these obstacles and make a relationship work. And I just absolutely loved it. I do think the romance in this one took a back seat, and there was really a big focus on the familial relationship in this book. But I think that added to how realistic this book felt, and the emotions of the characters felt so genuine, and the things they had to overcome to be together really made it a romance worth rooting for. So it's definitely one of my GOAT reads of the year. Wild and Wrangled is, I think, the final book in the Rebel Blue Ranch series. And I liked this one. I felt the same about this book as I did Lost and Lassoed. It was really fun in the moment. It was cute. It was enjoyable. I would say it's a good palate cleanser, but nothing that really stuck with me. I liked this series overall, especially after reading Chestnut Springs and loving those cowboy romances so much and wanting something to kind of fill that void. These books did that for me, although I don't think they're anywhere near as good as Chestnut Springs personally. I would put this one also in good, waiting for you to be great. The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren is a marriage of convenience romance. We follow our two main characters, Anna and Liam. Liam's sister is getting married on this private island. He has a very wealthy family. He's been in a marriage of convenience with Anna for a while now because Anna needed to marry him to be able to get affordable housing in college, but she thought the marriage was null and void. However, it is not, and he kind of needs her to come along to this family wedding because he's been telling his family about his wife and that she's just busy, and that's why they haven't met her yet. So we follow Anna. We live through her vicariously as she's living her best life on this private island, pretending to be happily married to Liam, and we watch the feelings turn from fake to real. And in addition to the romance, there's also an amazing subplot involving Liam's family and all the drama and scandal going on with them. And this, to me, was the perfect rom-com. It was just the perfect blend of everything I want. It had tension, it had humor, it had the perfect amount of spice. I loved the setting. It was just so fun, and the plot outside of the romance added so much to it. Anna is one of the funniest female main characters I've ever read from, and then Liam is one of my favorite book boyfriends. I just loved him so much. He was so down bad for Anna, and it was so cute. This is definitely going in GOAT, one of my favorite 5-star reads of the whole year. Hot for Slayer by Ali Hazelwood was a novella she put out around Halloween time. It is a romance between a vampire and a vampire hunter. Definitely an enemies to lovers situation. And this one was very mid for me. I liked the vibes of it, but it was just too short to really get much out of it, I think. And I'm kind of over vampire romances. I don't think I was disappointed by this one because I didn't have high expectations, to be honest, going in. Ali Hazelwood is just an auto-buy author for me. So I would say this one was good, just not great. Blue Sisters by Coco Mellors was a highly anticipated read for me after absolutely loving her debut novel, Cleopatra and Frankenstein. This one I enjoyed because I love books about sister relationships, and we follow 3 sisters as they're grieving the loss of their 4th sister. And the 3 sisters are extremely different from one another. They all have very different personalities and careers, and they live in different cities. So it was interesting to see them come together after the death of their sister. I'm going to put this one in a little something missing. Sadly, I just wanted more from it. I didn't fall in love with the story or connect with the characters the way I did in Cleopatra and Frankenstein. And I also feel like I was so captivated by Coco Mellors' writing in her first book. And don't get me wrong, the writing was great, but I just didn't find myself as taken with it as I was in her debut. So a little something was missing for me. I also feel like there really was only one sister in this book that I enjoyed reading from. The others were making really poor decisions. So it made them realistic because they were flawed. They felt like real people, but it also wasn't the most enjoyable thing to read about. Okay, Wildside by Elsie Silver. This is her 3rd book in her spin-off series to the Chestnut Springs series. I think it's called Rose Hill, and they are all single dad romances. And in this one, our 2 main characters get off on the wrong foot. The main thing that stands out to me about this book is that our male main character is a wrestler, and his wrestling name is Wildside. And I feel like I learned so much about wrestling in this book. I didn't realize that it was low-key acting. And I will say the wrestling part really cringed me out a lot. Just some of the scenes, I feel like if you read this, you probably know what I'm talking about. I was trying to like power through and keep a straight face, but I just could not take some moments seriously. So I don't know. I feel like I'm always gonna love an Elsie Silver book. They're quick, they're easy, they're fun, they're spicy. But I think this one was just a bit mid for me. This whole series has been a bit mid for me, honestly. I haven't really loved any of the books the way I love Chestnut Springs. I still need to read Wildcard, and I plan to continue on with the series, but nothing I am obsessed with. So that is going to conclude my tier ranking. Here's one final look. I feel pretty good about where everything is. So guys, that is going to conclude my 2025 wrap up, me tier ranking every single book that I read last year. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. I feel like I've been talking and filming for so long. It literally went from light to dark without me noticing. So we've been here for a minute. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed watching and stuck with me this long. Let me know down below in the comments how your reading year went last year. Let me know if we have any of the same or different opinions on the books that I read. If you would put any of the books in different tiers, let me know that down below as well. And thank you guys so much for being here on my reading journey with me, however long you've been here. I'm so excited for a whole nother year of reading in 2026. So if you're not already, I hope you will consider subscribing by hitting the subscribe button down below. It really helps me out, and I'd love for you guys to stick around. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you so soon in my next video. Bye guys.